Yes. So in the devotions, we saw about how faithful God has been to all of us, and God has been to his people throughout history and even now. And today, I just want to talk more about how humans' faithfulness is. And I would like to talk about none other than the man after God's own heart, David. And we all know about his life, right? And we know that how he has pursued God's heart, but there have been times when he was not so strong in the Lord. And what really happened there? What really happened was that he was wounded. And I just want to talk about this instance from the Bible, which is from First Samuel. So we all know that Prophet Samuel, he anoints David to be the king of Israel, while Saul was already the king. And when this happens, David believes it. David believes it. But for good number of years, it doesn't really happen. He doesn't really see that promise getting fulfilled. And he just gets tired of waiting, I guess we can say that. He gets tired of waiting. And how many times have we been tired of waiting on something that God has promised us? I've been there. And we see David over here that he's tired. And I would just like to read one verse from First Samuel and chapter 27. So David is already anointed, and he has been fleeing from Saul because Saul wants to kill him. And he is fleeing from Saul. God is protecting him. And one day, David thinks to himself in chapter 27 of First Samuel. I'm reading the verse. Here it says, "But David thought to himself, one of these days I will be destroyed by the hand of Saul. The best thing I can do is to escape to the land of Philistines. Then Saul will give up searching for me anywhere in Israel, and I will slip out of his hand." So here, David is thinking this to himself, okay, let me escape to the land of Philistines. Now, Philistines were the enemies of Israel, okay? And Philistines were enemies of Saul as well. And David thinks that if I just escape, if હું એ લોકોની લેન્ડમાં જતો રહીશ તો સોલ મને ત્યાં આવશે જ નહીં મારી પાછળ અને હું બચી જઈશ. Now, this is not something which God told him to do. He did this himself because he was tired of fleeing and he was tired of waiting and whatnot. And this sounds familiar to me because sometimes I do that too. I am so tired and I'm so scared, and I just try to, think, oh, what can I do? What my mind can comprehend. અને મને જે ઠીક લાગે ને હું એ કરીશ. કે oh, આવું કરીશ ને તો બચી જઈશ or whatever. And I think we all have been there. As humans, we all have been there. And David was in that place. And even though he was so strong in God, he was so faithful to God, he was after God's own heart, and he had from the very childhood, from his very childhood age, he had, sought out God and whatnot. But he's in this place and he thinks of escaping, and he ends up escaping. And I just want to say, this reminds me of a quote from Charles Spurgeon. And Charles Spurgeon says something like, "You have no armor for your back. To cease to fight is to be overcome." Now, that's a dangerous place to be in when we just think that, oh, if I just escape, if I stop fighting, I'll be fine, But that's not always the case. David stopped fighting. He stopped fleeing, even though God was protecting him. He stopped fleeing. He just escaped to this place of the enemy, and he thought that, okay, Saul won't touch me anymore. And he stopped fighting. Now, in Ephesians 6, we have the whole armor of God. But we have a breastplate, we have the truth belt, we have the helmet and everything, but we don't have a backplate. So if we start running, our back is not covered. So God asks us to fight. And when we are fighting, we have a breastplate, we have a shield, but we don't have a backplate. So on our back, we are not covered. So when we are running, our back is not covered. When we are fighting, we are covered. And that's what the armor of God is. God doesn't want us to stop fighting. God doesn't want us to, uh, you know, He doesn't want us to run away. He wants us to show up. So if we need to get rest, that's okay. But don't stop fighting. And as long as you're fighting, you're in the center of the will of God. But David here, he wants to rest, and he's tired, and he ends up in the place where he's not supposed to be in. And then what happens is, he goes to King Achish, uh, who is who is also kind of collaborating with Philistines, and King Achish is also enemy of the nation of Israel. Now, when David goes there, he doesn't go there alone. There's 600 men who are following him. 600 men who are actually being with him. He goes with them. Their families, his own family, everybody. They all go to this King Achish, and he asks King Achish that if I have found favor in your eyes, let a place be assigned to me in one of the country towns that I may live there. એન્ડ કિંગ આકીશ એ લોકોને એક જગ્યા આપે છે તેનું નામ છે ઝિકલેગ. અને ઝિકલેગની અંદર ડેવિડ is living there with those 600 men and their families, his own family. Now, at that time, David had 2 wives, so they were also living with him. And in Bible, it says over here, okay, David lived in Philistine territory a year and 4 months. So he lived there for almost a year and a half. And now when he was living there, there are chapter 27, 28, 29, and until chapter 30, we don't see David talking about God. And we don't see him, Bible doesn't talk about him writing any psalms or him writing any prophecies. Bible doesn't talk about that. So we don't know, actually. We cannot really tell he wrote anything or not, but looks like he was away from God in that time. And then something really um something really sensitive happens over there. So now what happens is, David was serving, basically he was serving King Achish for one year and 4 months. Now King Achish, he is he considers David trustworthy. And now Philistines and the nation of King Achish, they all decide to go at war against Israel. So now when they are preparing for that, King Achish says that David and his army, David and his men, they will fight through us. They will fight against the king of Israel. So basically now it's a very bad place to be in. David was an Israelite, he was an Hebrew, and his men were Hebrews, and they were supposed to fight against Israel, along with King Achish and the Philistines. And when King Achish asks David to do that, David is okay with that. But then the Philistines, who are also collaborating with King Achish, when King Achish tells them that, okay, David is going to help us, he's going to fight through us, and Philistines are not okay with that. Philistines say that, isn't this David the same who was fighting with Saul, and the whole rumor was going on that Saul killed thousands and David killed 10,000s? Isn't this the same David? And King Achish says that, yeah, he is the same David, but he has gained my favor, and I trust him that he's gonna fight through us. He's gonna fight for us. And Philistines are like, no, 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 no. We don't trust that. We don't trust him, So we would not like David to fight. So what King Achish does is he tells David to go back to Ziklag, and tells him, you're not gonna fight Israel for us. They don't trust you. Philistines don't trust you. So I don't want you to fight. So basically now David is going back. He is a little disheartened, but he's going back from where they were preparing for the war to the place Ziklag, જ્યાં David and એનું આખું આજે એના men હતા અને એનું family હતું એ લોકો રહેતા હતા. સો ડેવિડ ત્યાં એના મેન જોડે પાછો જાય છે અને જ્યારે તે ઝિકલાગ ત્યાં પાછો પહોંચે છે ત્યારે તેને ત્યાં કોઈ મળતું નથી, બધું તહેસ નહેસ થઈ ગયું હોય છે અને the whole place, Ziklag, burned out થઈ ગયું હોય છે. It is burned. There's nobody there. And what has happened was Amalekites, they were also a group of people who were enemies, and basically they were raiding territories, બધું લૂંટી લે and everything. They were doing all of that. અને એ લોકોએ આ બધું બાળી કાઢ્યું હોય છે, એ લોકોનું જેટલું બી બધું સામાન હોય છે, જે લોકો possessions હોય છે, એ બધું એ લોકોએ લઈ લીધું હોય છે. They have done a loot over there. They have taken it all, and they have also taken captives of they have also made captives of David's family and the men who were with David. એ લોકોનું families ને પણ એ લોકોએ captive બનાવી લીધા હોય છે અને એ લોકોને લઈને જતા રહે છે. So now now we are in chapter 30 of 1 Samuel, and any other David has just reached Ziklag with his men, and they found it destroyed by fire, their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. And in verse 4, it says that, so David and his men wept aloud until they had no strength to weep. So I mean, David and his men, they wept aloud until they had no strength to weep. Have you ever been there? Because I have. I have wept until I had no strength left to weep. So we can imagine, like, if you have been there, then you can imagine, you can understand that how bad of a place that must have been. He has basically lost everything. He has already left Israel and come to this place, and now anya aya છતાં જે એને લાગતું હતું કે સોલથી બચી જઈશ, પણ અહીંયા તો શું થયું, અહીંયા તો એનો ફેમિલીને કેપ્ટિવ બનાવી લીધા છે અને એની પાસે કશું બચ્યું નથી. અને David's two wives, they had been captured, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And David was greatly distressed. Now આ તો બધું થયું જ છે, પ્લસ જે 600 માણસો જે એની જોડે હતા ને, they were also thinking and talking of stoning David. So David didn't have family, he didn't have his nation, he didn't have a home, his home was burned. And now જે મેન એની જોડે આયા હતા અત્યાર સુધી જે હતા, એ લોકો પણ એને સ્ટોન કરવાની વાત કરી રહ્યા હતા. So that was the lowest that David could have been, and he was there. And each one, and in verse 6 it says there, each one was bitter in spirit because of his sons and daughters. Everybody was, basically against David. But what does David do over here? It further says that, but David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. David strengthened himself. And so many times we are waiting when we are at our lowest. We are thinking, what am I going to do? I don't have anybody. I'm stuck here. I'm lonely. I'm away from family. Who's going to help me? Everybody is just busy, or everybody is like, enjoying their own life. And you're waiting for that one encouragement, that one sermon, someone to prep you, or something like that. But here there is nobody to encourage David. There's nobody to give him a pep talk. There's nobody to give him a sermon, to exhort him, or anything at all. And everything is destroyed. But David chooses to strengthen himself in the Lord his God. He himself encourages himself. He himself gives him a pep talk. He himself gains that strength and finds that strength in the Lord. Not to forget that for 1 year and 4 months he had served the enemy army in enemy kingdom. He had been away from Israel. He was not in a good place to be strengthen himself to the Lord, in the Lord, because he had been away from the Lord. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. And I really love how Pastor Vlad Sauchuk, he says this: when you are in a spiritual fatigue and you ask God to strengthen you, but God doesn't feed you because you're no longer a toddler and there's food in the fridge. So, you're waiting for that encouragement to come. You're praying to God, okay, God, please encourage me, please strengthen me. And God says that there is food in the fridge. You are not a baby Christian anymore. You have the word of God, and that's your food. So why don't you go and read that? Why don't you go and strengthen yourself in it? And that's what David did. He strengthens himself. He doesn't wait for anybody to come and feed him. He strengthens himself. He in the Lord. And so then what happens? David strengthened himself in the Lord, and then in verse 7, David has a strategy. So when you strengthen yourself in the Lord, you get your strategy to fight the battle. And in verse 7, 1 Samuel 30 and verse 7, David said to Abiathar, the priest, the son of Ahimelech, bring me the ephod. Abiathar brought it to him. Now, Abiathar, where does he come from? He is one of the men in those 600 જે 600 men જે ડેવિડને ફોલો કરી રહ્યા હતા એમાંનો એક હતો અબિયાથાર, and he was a priest. So he was a Levite. And અબિયાથાર જોડે ડેવિડ વાત કરે છે અને ડેવિડને એ સ્ટ્રેટેજી મળે છે. પ્રભુ એને આઈડિયા આપે છે કે અબિયાથાર છે, અને પછી he just talks and he goes to અબિયાથાર, અને એ અબિયાથારને કહે છે કે આજે Amalekites છે who is a raiding party. So if we go after Amalekites, ask God. Okay, let me read the verse over here. In verse 8, David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? And Abiathar, since he's a priest, he says it on behalf of God that, yeah, pursue them. He answered, you will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue. So, so David hears from God, basically, and God tells him to go and pursue them, and he will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue. So, when you're at the bottom, when you hit rock bottom, David hit rock bottom, but he strengthened himself in the Lord. He gets a strategy, and when he gets a strategy, he asks God, and God tells him what to do. So when you hit that rock bottom, make sure that you don't forget God. You seek God in that rock bottom, because your rock bottom, even if you hit rock bottom, enemy thinks that, oh, he has got you down, and you're at your lowest, but you're not at your lowest, because your rock bottom is Christ. Christ is the rock of ages. He is your rock bottom. He is your firm foundation. So even if you reach your rock bottom, you're the closest to Christ, and in him you can find your strength. So what happens here next is, David now has a plan. He is going after the Amalekites to get everything back, what they had taken away. So David, in verse 9, it says over here, David and the 600 men with him came to Besor Valley, where some stayed behind. 200 of them were too exhausted to cross the valley, but David and the other 400 continued the pursuit. સો હવે અહીંયા શું થાય છે કે એ લોકો ડિસાઇડ કરે છે કે આપણે અમાલિકોઇટ્સની પાછળ જઈશું અને એ લોકોને લડીશું અને આપણે બધું પાછું લાવીશું. પ્રભુએ એ વચન આપ્યું છે. ઓકે, સો હવે એ લોકો બધું પ્રિપેર કરીને 600 માણસો, ડેવિડ અને એના 600 માણસો એ લોકો જાય છે. હવે જાય છે ત્યારે એ લોકો જ્યારે આ બેસોર વેલીમાં પહોંચે છે ને, ત્યારે 200 માણસો એ બહુ થાકી ગયા હોય છે અને they don't want to continue further. So હવે અહીંયા there were two choices. Either David could have been disappointed or mad or upset, okay, you guys are doing this or whatever, or David could just let it go, and with the 400 men he can still go ahead. So what does David do? David doesn't shame them for being tired. David doesn't belittle them, okay, you guys are lacking strength, and in this moment you guys are doing this with me. He doesn't do all of that. He lets them be, and he still goes further with 400 men to fight those Amalekites. So that tells me that he's a very great leader, and he doesn't forget his compassion when he's at his lowest. He is still merciful, he's still empathizing with people, and he's still giving grace to them. And And he is also trusting provision of God. He is still going further with 400 men because he knows it better. He knows that then when God is with you, you can never be outnumbered, no matter how it looks like. So when you find strength in the Lord, you have enough enough of it to make up for those who don't. And that's what I think we learn from David over here. And then what happens? He further goes down and he doesn't know કે Amalekites ક્યાં છે. એ લોકોની territory કઈ છે. He doesn't know that. But he is still continuing forward. And then in verse 11, here it says that they found an Egyptian in a field and brought him to David. And so they found an Egyptian. હવે ડેવિડ ઓલરેડી વોર કરવા જઈ રહ્યો છે. ભાઈ એની પાસે ટાઈમ નથી ટુ હેલ્પ અધર પીપલ. ટાઈમ છે એની પાસે હેલ્પ કરવા માટે? ના. He is already going on a war. He doesn't have time for that. But here it says that they found an Egyptian in a field and brought him to David. And David, he's so nice. He, even in all of these circumstances, even all of this mess and chaos, he is willing to help this Egyptian who has nothing to do with him. He doesn't even know his background or akonche, whatever, nothing. He doesn't know anything. But he sees him and they gave him water to drink and food to eat. He ate and was received. He ate and was revived. In verse 9 over here, it says, verse 12 here, it says that he ate that food and was revived, and for he had not eaten any food or drunk any water for 3 days and 3 nights. So that Egyptian, David and the men, they helped him. They gave him food and they gave him water, and they had to know that, okay, he had not eaten from 3 days and 3 nights. And then after helping him, David asks him, who do you belong to? Where do you come from? And the man said, I am an Egyptian, the slave of an Amalekite. My master abandoned me when I became ill 3 days ago. We raided the Negev of Kerethites, some territory belonging to Judah, and the Negev of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag, which was David's place, So this servant, this person who they helped, ends up being a servant of one of the Amalekite masters. And so basically, David ends up helping the person who was actually a part of whatever bad happened to David, and then David asks him, can you lead me down to this raiding party? So the Amalekite, the servant, he says that okay, હું lead કરીશ તમને, પણ please તમે મને મારી ના કાઢશો, or don't hand me over back to my master. And he says all of that, and then that Egyptian, he shows him the way to the Amalekites camp, to where those Amalekites were hiding after doing the raiding. So okay, let's just think about it. If David had not helped this person, if David had just been like, I'm on my way, I don't have time for this. If David had done that, he would have never gotten to know where the Amalekites were. He would have never gotten to know how to, further go ahead. ક્યાં જવાનું છે એને ના ખબર પડી હોત. But, he chose to help him. And that help actually became more good for him than for the person who got the help, it was more favorable for David than for that person. So, I just want to say that sometimes when we think like, okay, we need this miracle, we need this healing, we need to win this war. And when we are on the way to that, and you choose to help someone, and that help actually becomes a way to your miracle. And isn't that something? So you are helping out of your goodness of your heart, but that ends up becoming your rescue, actually. And that's what happens over here. So when you are in warfare, do not stop serving, do not stop helping, do not stop having compassion, do not stop having empathy for someone who maybe needed more than you. So that's what we learned from his life over here. And this is not even the end of it, but it does look like what a victory, right? And further, what happens is, um, yeah, so God wants us to serve others sometimes in the very areas that we are expecting breakthrough. When David helped a stranger, he didn't know who he was. Had he never helped him, he would have never known where the Amalekites were hiding. Now, now he knows where the Amalekites are hiding. So he goes there and um he fights with them. And what happens is that okay, but he is victorious over the Amalekites. He is victorious, and they um in verse 19 it says, David recovered everything the Amalekites had taken, including his two wives. Nothing was missing, young or old, boy or girl, plunder or anything else they had taken. David brought everything back. David brought everything back. And when he got everything back, here it says કે જે એ લોકોએ લૂંટી લીધું હતું ને, ડેવિડનું ને એના મેનનું હતું, જે એ લોકોએ ઓલરેડી લૂંટી લીધું હતું, એ તો એ લોકોને પાછું મળ્યું જ. પણ અમાલેકાઇટ્સના જે એ લોકોએ જે બીજું બધું બી રેડ પાડીને બધું જે લૂંટ્યું હતું, એ લોકોનું બી બધા પોઝેશન્સ ત્યાં જ હતા, સો એ બધા પોઝેશન્સ પણ ડેવિડને એના મેન લઈને આવ્યા, અને અમાલેકાઇટ્સના કેમ્પમાંથી જે થોડાક લોકો એ કેમલ્સ પર બેસીને ભાગી ગયા અને એટલા લોકો બચી ગયા. બાકી જેટલા લોકો જે કેમ્પમાં હતા, જે ફાઇટ કરી રહ્યા હતા, એમાંથી એક પણ જીવતો ના બચ્યો, એવું બાઇબલ કહે છે. અને પછી જ્યારે આ બધું જે બધું પોઝેશન્સ હોય છે, ડેવિડને પોતાનું બધા પોઝેશન્સ તો મળે જ છે, ફેમિલી એન્ડ એવરીથિંગ, બધું ઢોર ઢાંકને જે બધું બી એ લોકો લઈ ગયા હશે, એ પોતાના પોઝેશન્સ તો લાવે જ છે. પણ જે અમાલિકાઇટના જે એક્સ્ટ્રા હતા, એ લોકોનું જે હતું એ પણ તે લઈને આવે છે. અને જ્યારે ડેવિડ એ બધું પાછો લઈને આવે છે, ત્યારે એના જે પેલા 400 માણસો હોય છે ને, જે એની જોડે આ ફાઇટ કરવા ગયા હોય છે, તો એ લોકો એવું કહે છે કે અમે લોકોએ તારી જોડે ફાઇટ કરી, સો આ બધું આપણા વચ્ચે શેર થશે. પેલા 200 માણસો જે ત્યાં રેસ્ટ કરવા રહી ગયા છે ને પાછળ, એ લોકોને નહીં આપીએ. તો it kind of sounds fair, to be honest, but David he's something else. David, what he does is he stands his ground, and he says that in verse 23 over here, it says, David replied, No, my brothers, you must not do that with what the Lord has given us. He has protected us and delivered into our hands the raiding party that came against us. Who will listen to what you say? The share of the man who stayed with the supplies is to be same as that of him who went down to the battle. All will share alike. David made this a statute, an ordinance for Israel from that day to this. So he stood his ground and he said that no, it will be shared with all of those men as well. So એટલા 200 માણસો છે ને, એ લોકોને પણ મળશે આ, અને એ લોકોને પણ મળશે. And then એ લોકોને પણ જોડે એ શેર કરે છે. અને પછી further in the end of this chapter, જ્યારે ડેવિડ પાછો ઝિકલાગ પહોંચે છે, એના બધું ફેમિલીને, આ બધા મેનને, એ લોકોના ફેમિલીને લઈને, અને આ જે બધું બી એમને પોઝેશન, they got it back, એ બધું લઈને, when he reaches back to Ziklag, in verse 26 it says, when David reached Ziklag, he sent some of the plunder to the elders of Judah, who were his friends, saying, here is a gift for you from the plunder of the Lord's enemies. David sent it to those who were in, અને પછી બધી પ્લેસીસનું નામ કહે છે. And you will not believe this, but just think about it. How much did he brought back, that he had so much. He not only blessed the elders of Judah with it, but David was roaming since a long time, right? So જેટલી બી places છે David અને એના men ગયા હતા ને, to seek help, એ બધી places, I could count 13 places, 1-3. અને એમાંનું એક બે place છે ને, એમાં તો એવું કહે છે કે to those in the towns of Jerahmeelites and the Kenites, એ લોકોના townsમાં. So 13 places તો મેં count કરી, અને પછી પેલા લોકોના towns પણ. એટલા બધાને એ લોકોને પાછું મોકલે છે, લાઈક પાછું, આઈ મીન એ લોકોને બ્લેસ કરે છે, જે લોકોને આ બધું, એ લોકોને જે બી મળ્યું ને એનાથી. He doesn't keep it to himself. He does share it with the 200 men જે લોકો આયા નતા, એમની જોડે તો શેર કર્યું જ. પછી elders of Judah who were his friends, બેક ફ્રોમ નેશન ઓફ ઇઝરાયલ, એ લોકો જોડે પણ શેર કર્યું. અને જે 13 પ્લેસીસ જે લોકોએ એમને જ્યારે એ લોકો રોમ કરી રહ્યા હતા અને એમની હેલ્પ કરી હતી, તો એ લોકો જોડે પણ શેર કર્યું. અને જસ્ટ થિંક, આઈ કેનોટ ફેથમ કેટલું બધું એ લોકો પાછું લાવ્યા હશે કે they had so much to share with this many people. So today I just want to say that, we just see God, we just see that David, even when he was wounded, even when he was at his lowest, he was faithful to seek God. He was faithful to seek him, and strengthen himself in him when he is when he had nobody else to encourage him. So he was faithful to seek God. And when God replied to him, he was faithful to believe God's word. He had very less men. જેટલા હતા એના કરતા પણ ઓછા થઈ ગયા, કેમ કે પેલા લોકો થાકી ગયા હતા ખાલી. એ લોકો ટોક્સિક નતા, એ લોકો ખાલી થાકી ગયા હતા. They were not even bad people. But then also David was like, it's okay. And then he was faithful to trust in God's provision. When he was on his way, he was also compassionate on those people. And when he was on his way to war, he was faithful to serve. He was faithful to serve a stranger. And then he was also faithful to share the victory with others. Those 200 men, he didn't forget them. He shared his victory with them. And after all of this, he was also faithful to share his blessing, જે લોકોએ એને પાસ્ટમાં હેલ્પ કરી હતી. So he shared his blessing with them. He was faithful in that as well. So that's, I think, that are my takeaways from this. And I hope God also spoke to you through this message, that how you can still be faithful when you're wounded. We just wait for that perfect life to come, okay, when I am walking perfectly in the journey with God, when I am praying 3 times a day, when I am following all the laws, following, my heart is right and everything. We just wait for that perfect life, for that perfect Christian heart, to serve others. But that perfect thing, does it ever come? It, like, does it ever come? Sometimes you just feel like, okay, when બધું perfect હશે ને ત્યારે હું serve કરીશ. પણ you can still serve, and you can still pour out even when you're wounded, because that's what David did. And he was still, even after all of this, he was still called the man after God's heart. So I think that's what I want to learn from this. And that's what I want to say, that don't wait for that. Don't wait for your life to be perfect, but pour out yourself, even when you're wounded, even when you are at your rock bottom. And in whatever season of your life you are, be faithful. And it might not be the way you are thinking it would be, or you are expecting it would be, but do it anyway. Show up anyway. Show up broken, um show up guilty, show up even if you feel shameful, even if you feel guilty of something, still show up for someone else. And let God do all the everything else. So yeah, my question is that how can we be faithful in our current season of life in the same manner? And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ria, for this powerful study that you've given us. આ સાંભળતા સાંભળતા મને એક